guys, it's Megan Aller back at you Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock going over the Greater Metro Denver Market Review. This week we're going to cover what's happening in the attached market. Unlike what's happening in the detached single-family market, where we're actually not seeing as much shift as what we would think there is, there's actually some interesting shift that's happening in our attached single-family market. So let's go ahead and cover the difference between the two markets for you this week. So when we're talking about this report, please keep in mind I only talk about the 7 Metro Denver counties. If it's not included in the list that I have here on the front page and on the back side of this report, it's not included in this report. Now, I want you to remember back about 18 months ago, what happened was that we had builder defect laws that were remedied in Metro Denver that allowed for builders who were sitting on parcels of land to go through and start building those attached units again. It was cost prohibitive for developers to build those condos due to those builder defect laws. And now that it's been about 18 months, lo and behold, we have those new construction units that are now coming to market that buyers are choosing, in some cases, over the resale market. And so what happens is that shows elevating numbers and shift that's happening in our attached market. But we don't have that happening in the detached market to the degree that we have it happening in our attached market, specifically within central Denver. When we look at active inventory, we're looking at signs of seasonal decline where our inventory goes down month over month. However, when we look at the year-over-year transition, we're actually up almost 40% in terms of active units. Again, that's because what's happening is people are choosing to purchase those new construction units in some cases rather than looking at those that are resale units. Days on market also start to stretch out the longer that we have inventory build up. Average days to contract was 28, median 16 days to contract as we closed out those units in November. Closed to list price ratios dropped below 100% again for attached single family, and they were down to 99%. It's been quite a while since we've seen that low of a number, even though that's still an extremely strong number when we're looking at sales for attached single family units. Finally, flash sales also declined. We're now sitting at about 32.6 of those units that closed last month were under contract in that first weekend. Those numbers continue to decline as we go into December, January, and February, and we'll see an uptick again as we go into those spring months. Now again, because we have inventory growing for those attached single family units, we also need to look at the relationship between under contract and closed units because we're actually seeing a taper off there, which kind of gives us this double whammy that makes our month's supply of inventory go up. And what ends up happening over time, if inventory grows and demand tapers off, prices level out, if not start to drop just a little bit. We're nowhere close to a place where our prices are starting to drop, but we do see that decline or less appreciation happening year over year, unlike that sensational appreciation year over year that we've had for the last 6 years, which ended up being somewhere between 10 to 14%, which is ridiculous, okay? Now, as we look at it for Metro Denver for attached units, what we anticipate going into October, November, and December is that those units continue to decline. In this month, we end up having a slightly lower decline. Typically, they should go down by 15.5% from October to November. This year, they only went down by 7%. However, when we look at where we should have been this year versus previous years in this cycle, if you look at this, the last 3 months in a row, and 3 is typically a good benchmark for me to say, yep, there's some shift and some change that's happening here in Metro Denver. And so now this is something that we really need to keep a close eye on, because as that inventory goes up, we need to make sure that our market kind of stabilizes and what happens with pricing. Now, if inventory goes up and supply remains relatively consistent, we have to go softer on our pricing. You can't be as aggressive. So sellers, heed my warning. You need to pull back on your prices a little bit. When we look at under contract units, again, they've stayed relatively in line with what we anticipate, but with that increasing inventory, relatively steady demand, again, prices start to fall backwards, okay? Now, when we look at the ratio between supply and demand, lo and behold, there's that 3 months right in a row again in another metric that shows that our ratio of buyers to sellers is significantly up in Metro Denver. But keep in mind that it's only slightly less good. This doesn't mean that it's transitioning to an extreme buyer's market or that the buyer has the advantage in the market. It's just a slightly less good market as we start to look at this transition start to take place here in Metro Denver. Now, we're up to, we would typically anticipate being around 1.3 months worth of inventory. We're now sitting pretty consistently at 1.8 to 1.9 months worth of inventory, which is still an extreme seller's market, but it's not as extreme as what we've seen for the last 5 to 6 years in a row. To get to a point where we need to be balanced, the dark blue bar represents what we currently have in terms of active inventory. The red bar represents what we would need to offset demand based off of what closed in the previous month. As of right now, we only have 2,100 active units for attached single family. Currently in Metro Denver, we would need to have around 6,400 active units in order to create a 6-month supply of inventory, which would make our market in equilibrium. Now, notice as prices go up, we get closer to equilibrium. There are fewer people that can afford to buy those super luxury units. Looking at those units that are over 1 million or 3 million or more for attached single family. And so those numbers can report just a little bit more volatile, but we're far away from where we were at the peak of the last market. We're just watching it taper down at this point. It's important that we continue to watch this and that sellers understand that they can't be as aggressive in their pricing right now and see how long this shift continues to go in. Again, thanks so much for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. Stay tuned for the report next week, and I'll cover what changes over price bands and different pieces of information, and every Wednesday at 10 o'clock on my social media outlets. I hope that if I can help you better advise your buyers and sellers, that we'll get to see those buyers and sellers at First American's closing tables. Thanks so much, guys.